When Amanda Zarowski got pregnant, she and her husband Josh were thrilled. After receiving fertility treatments for a year and a half, they felt like this was a miracle. But then, during her 18th week of pregnancy, Amanda's water broke. The doctors said there was nothing they could do and that their child would not survive. When a person's water breaks, they are at a high risk for life-threatening infection. So the safest option for Amanda would have been to receive abortion care. However, under Texas law, that was not an option because Amanda's life was not at imminent risk. So doctors told her she would have to wait and see what happened. And if she started to feel sick, she needed to go to the hospital immediately. And that meant traveling to another state for care would be too risky. 3 days later, infection set in, and Amanda's life was in danger. So her medical team was able to terminate the pregnancy. However, the infection had spread so fast, she began to develop symptoms of sepsis and was taken to the ICU. Fortunately, Amanda survived. But she suffered scarring from the infection and may not be able to have any more children. Since this happened, Texas has tried to clarify their laws around abortion, but the allowed exceptions there are still very narrow. An even stricter law is in place in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Before sharing some of the text of that law, I have to say getting this information was not easy. The language of our state's law is confusing, and there is a lot of misinformation out there. To sort it all out, I reached out to a professional policy expert, and I'm so grateful for her help. Here is the text of the current Kentucky law. No person may knowingly administer to, prescribe for, procure for, or sell to any pregnant woman any medication, drug, or other substance with the specific intent of causing or abetting the termination of the life of an unborn human being, or use or employ any instrument or procedure upon a pregnant woman with the specific intent of causing or abetting the termination of the life of an unborn human being. This means that under current law, both medicinal and surgical abortions are banned in Kentucky. The only exception is to prevent the death of a person or the permanent injury to a life-sustaining organ. Injury to reproductive organs is not included in the law. A bill was brought forward earlier this year that would have added exceptions for rape, incest, or for a non-viable pregnancy, but it did not make it through the legislative process. We are currently in a worship series exploring some of the issues that are getting a lot of attention during this election cycle. Today, we are going to talk about abortion and reproductive justice. As we begin that conversation, I want to mention that our Associate Minister, Rachel Freeney, preached a sermon on this topic in July of 2023. That sermon was outstanding, and there is little chance my message today will be its equal. There are important aspects of this topic she covered that I will not repeat. So we have posted a link to her message with today's sermon on our website. I really encourage you to watch it. One of the things she talked about that I will repeat is that in this church, we seek to create a safe space. There are all kinds of different experiences, emotions, and beliefs that people are carrying into this conversation. We also need to recognize that there are people in our church who have had, have considered having, or are currently considering having an abortion. In this space, we choose compassion over judgment, and we choose to listen with open hearts and minds. We choose kindness, and we are committed to providing grace-filled and loving care regardless of a person's chosen path. This is a deeply personal matter. What is right for you may not be right for someone else. So let's be gentle with one another and with ourselves when it comes to this. Before we talk about abortion care in the modern world, let's talk a little bit about its existence in the ancient world. One of the earliest mentions of abortion is found in an Egyptian papyrus that dates all the way back to 1500 BC. Not long after that, we start to see evidence of it in Babylon, Syria, Greece, and Rome. That evidence shows that there were both surgical and medicinal options for abortions. Because surgical options came with a higher risk due to possible infection, medicinal options were preferred. History also shows that abortions in the ancient world were sought out for a variety of reasons, including matters of health and of personal choice. The primary reason this history is important to our conversation today is because it reminds us that abortions existed in the biblical world. They were part of Greek and Roman society well before Jesus was born, and the ancient community of faith was certainly aware of the practice. And yet the Bible does not directly address the issue. Yes, there are passages that people point to when discussing abortion care, but we need to be cautious before declaring any kind of definitive biblical perspective on this matter. Scripture could have talked about this issue specifically, but it doesn't. With that in mind, let's look at some of the passages that come up during a faith-based conversation about abortion, starting with one of the most common. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. This same sentiment was expressed by David in the Psalms. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And by the Apostle Paul in his letter to the Galatians. But when the one who had set me apart before I was born and called me through his grace was pleased. Passages like these are a theological expression of God's hand in the creation of life and are often used to argue for a more restrictive approach to abortion care. However, there are passages that can be used to support a different viewpoint. Here's an example of that from the book of Exodus. When people who are fighting injure a pregnant woman so that there is a miscarriage, and yet no further harm follows, the one responsible shall be fined what the woman's husband demands, paying as much as the judges determine. If any harm follows, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. This passage indicates that the loss of a pregnancy by miscarriage under these circumstances is only punishable by a fine. But if there is further bodily harm to the woman, then the punishment must be equal to the harm caused. This passage indicates there was a higher value of life placed on the woman than the fetus she carried. There is also a story told in Matthew, Mark, and Luke about a woman who suffered from hemorrhagic bleeding for 12 years. Unable to find a medical cure, she went to Jesus and touched his cloak. When she did, she was healed. While this story is not about abortion care, this was a gynecological issue. And due to the religious beliefs and practices of the time, it had kept her marginalized and separated from her community. But Jesus saw her, healed her, and brought her out of the shadows. He gave her the dignity and care she deserved as a child of God. So, given the ambiguity of the biblical text, how are modern Christians supposed to respond to this issue? I want to start by saying that no matter what our beliefs may be, as a people of faith, our response needs to be rooted in humility and grace. Conversations about abortion care are often focused on the extremes, which can lead to heated rhetoric and the dehumanization of others. While that approach may be good for politicians, it does not reflect where most people are on this issue, and it is in no way reflective of our faith. Our response also needs to be rooted in the spirit of biblical justice, which in this case begins with the recognition that life is sacred. On that, I think we can all agree. However, the ways in which a person honors the sanctity of life can take many forms and follow many paths. Because of that, we need to make sure that any laws or policies impacting abortion care reflect the complexity of the issue and treat all people with the dignity they deserve as a child of God. While that is the ideal path forward, we do need to address where we are right now, specifically here in Kentucky. Although there are a lot of differing opinions about what a biblically just abortion care law should look like, our current state law falls short of that threshold for many reasons. It does not reflect the medical complexities that might cause a person to need abortion care. It does not offer any choice for victims of rape or incest. It takes away all options for a person who may want to end a pregnancy for whatever reason they and their physician agree upon. And there is simply no justice in a law that requires a person to be near death before they can receive the medical care they need. The current law will also have a higher impact on low-income populations who cannot afford to travel to other states for abortion care. And if the past is prologue, that will likely lead to a rise in illegal and unsafe abortions. Now, all this said, let me be clear. I am not suggesting there can't be laws or policies impacting abortion care, including common sense regulations that protect the life of unborn children and their parents. There can be. While I will not propose any details of what such laws or policies should look like, I do imagine a future where the creation of any laws related to abortion care involves a more just approach. I imagine a future where there are as many women as there are men authoring these laws and voting to pass them. I imagine a future where medical professionals have a larger role in evaluating the consequences of any law that impacts people's health, and where those consequences are addressed before a law goes into effect. I imagine a future where a variety of religious opinions are part of the conversation, and where people of any faith or no faith at all have equal rights and privileges under the law. I imagine a future where, in addition to abortion care, we are addressing issues around access to contraception, comprehensive sex education, affordable and adequate prenatal and pregnancy health care, affordable pediatric medical care, affordable child care, living wages, safe and affordable housing, and so much more. A just society is not only concerned about children and their parents before a baby enters the world, but after they do so as well. All right. While there is so much more we could have covered today, I hope that what we have talked about is enough to get you thinking about how our faith speaks into the issue of abortion and reproductive justice. It's possible that I've left you with more questions than answers, and that's okay. It's also possible that you disagree with something I've said or a lot of things I've said. Some of you may think I've gone too far or not far enough. Again, all of that is okay. I am just one voice among many. This stuff is complicated. And getting where we need to be when it comes to abortion and reproductive justice is going to be a journey. I am just so grateful to be part of a church that understands how important that journey is and that is willing to be part of the effort to create a more just future for all of God's children. Amen.